Picture this. You're standing in a mountain pass in the Albanian highlands. The year is 1457. The morning air cuts into your lungs like a blade. Cold, thin, reeking of pine resin and damp earth after 3 days of rain. Below you, hidden in the dense forest and the steep ravines carved by the Shkumbin River, 8,000 men crouch in absolute silence. No fires, no voices, nothing but the sound of wind moving through the trees and the distant rhythmic thunder of 40,000 Ottoman boots marching directly into your trap. 40,000. Think about that for a second. That number isn't an army. That's a city on the move. 40,000 soldiers, professional warriors hardened by decades of conquest, marching through a narrow Albanian valley with the absolute confidence of men who've never met a force they couldn't crush. They've taken Constantinople. They've swallowed the Balkans whole. They've made emperors weep up and popes tremble. And they're about to walk into the jaws of a man who has been fighting them, alone, for 14 years. 8,000 against 40,000. What do those numbers feel like to you? Because that's not a battle. That's a massacre waiting to happen. At least that's what the Ottomans believe. But the man who designed this trap doesn't think in numbers. He thinks in terrain. He thinks in timing. He thinks in fear. And he understands the psychology of an army that has never learned what it feels like to be afraid. His name is Gjergj Kastrioti. You might know him by his other name, the name the Ottomans gave him as a child when they took him from his father's arms and turned him into one of their finest soldiers. They called him Skanderbeg. The Western world calls him Skanderbeg. And what he is about to do in this valley, in the shadow of the mountains above Albulena, on the 22nd of September, 1457, will shatter an Ottoman army 3 times the size of his own force and send shockwaves through the Islamic world all the way to Constantinople itself. Before we go any further, if you're watching this right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Seriously, this channel is watched from places I never imagined, and there's something incredible about people from all over the world gathering to hear a story like this one together. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because the stories we tell here, the battles that changed everything, the commanders who defied all logic and won anyway, these are the stories that deserve to be told. You're not just watching a history video. You're on a journey with me. And this one is special. Because what happens at Albulena in 1457 is not just the story of a battle. It's the story of a man who refused to let his people be erased from history. And it starts long before this valley. It starts with a boy who was taken from everything he knew. Let's be completely clear about what is at stake here. By the mid-15th century, the Ottoman Empire is not just a military power. It is a force of historical transformation on a scale that has not been seen since the armies of Alexander or the legions of Rome. In 1453, just 4 years before our battle, Sultan Mehmed II, a man known to history as the Conqueror, does something that most of the Christian world believed was literally impossible. He takes Constantinople, the Eastern Roman Empire, successor to Rome itself, the seat of Orthodox Christianity, the city protected by the greatest defensive walls in the known world, falls in 53 days. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, dies fighting in the breach. His body is never found. 1,100 years of Roman civilization simply ends on a Tuesday morning in May, and the world holds its breath. Because here is what the fall of Constantinople means in 1453. It doesn't just mean that one great city has changed hands. It means the Ottoman Empire now controls the gateway between Europe and Asia. It means there is no longer any major Christian power east of the Adriatic to serve as a buffer. It means the Ottoman westward march, which has been ongoing for over a century, just accelerated into something that feels like destiny, something that feels unstoppable. The Pope in Rome is terrified. The Italian city-states are terrified. The kings of France and Hungary and Poland, who have been watching the Ottoman advance with increasing horror, are now staring at a map and realizing there is almost nothing between Istanbul and Vienna, except a few fragmented, feuding Christian kingdoms and the mountains of the Balkans. And in those mountains, in one small, stubborn, poor, mountainous principality on the Adriatic coast, a single man has been fighting the Ottomans almost entirely alone for over a decade. That man is Skanderbeg. And here is the brutal truth about his situation in 1457. He is not fighting to win some grand strategic victory. He's not fighting to build an empire. He's fighting to survive. He's fighting so that his people, the Albanian lords, the clans of the highlands, the farmers and shepherds of Epirus, don't get swallowed by a military machine that has crushed everything from Serbia to Greece. He is fighting because if he stops fighting, the Ottomans will not just conquer Albania. They will use it as a highway straight into Italy, straight toward Rome. Skanderbeg understands something that most of his contemporaries don't. He understands that the Balkans are the spine of Europe. Control the mountains, control the passes, and you control whether an Ottoman army can ever reach the Italian peninsula with full strength. Every battle he fights, every ambush he springs in these mountain valleys, is not just a local Albanian skirmish. It is a cork in a bottle. It is a wall built from bodies and willpower. And now, in September of 1457, the Ottomans are done playing games with him. The man they've sent to finally finish Skanderbeg is Ishak Bey, a senior Ottoman commander, a man of considerable experience, a man who has led armies across the Balkans. He comes with 40,000 men. Not because 40,000 are needed to fight 8,000 Albanians, but because this is meant to be a final solution. A destruction so complete that Albania never rises again. A message to every small Christian principality still holding out in the Balkans. Surrender now, or face this. The empire has chosen not just to defeat Skanderbeg, it has chosen to obliterate him. What Ishak Bey doesn't know, what he cannot know, is that Skanderbeg has been preparing for exactly this moment. Not for weeks, not for months, for years. Let that sink in. To understand Albulena, you need to understand the man standing in those mountains with 8,000 soldiers. And to understand Skanderbeg, you need to go back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the battle, the beginning of the man himself. It is approximately 1405. The Principality of Kastrioti in the central Albanian highlands. A boy is born to Gjon Kastrioti, one of the Albanian lords, who has been carefully navigating the increasingly dangerous political landscape of the Balkans. Albania, at this point, is a patchwork of semi-independent principalities, clan territories, and feudal domains, all of them increasingly squeezed between the Ottoman Empire advancing from the east and the ambitions of Venice from the coast. Gjon Kastrioti is a pragmatist. He is trying to survive in a world that is becoming less and less forgiving of small powers. The boy's name at baptism is Gjergje, George, in the Albanian tradition. He is the fourth son, and for several years, he grows up in the highland fortress culture of medieval Albania, riding horses, learning to fight, absorbing the warrior traditions of his people. Then reality arrives. Around 1423, when Gjergje is roughly 17 or 18 years old, his father, Gjon Kastrioti, makes a decision that must have broken his heart. He sends his sons, 4 of them, to the Ottoman court as hostages. This was the standard Ottoman policy in the Balkans. Submit, acknowledge Ottoman suzerainty, pay tribute, and send your sons to Constantinople as insurance against rebellion. The sons would be educated at the Ottoman court, converted to Islam, trained as soldiers, integrated into the Ottoman system. From the Ottoman perspective, it was elegant policy. You take the sons of your potential enemies, and you turn them into instruments of your own power. You raise them to be loyal, or if not loyal, at least bound by culture, by career, by years of investment in Ottoman military service, to the system that made them. What happened to Gjergj Kastriotti's brothers is lost to history. They may have died. They may have been absorbed. But what happened to Gjergj himself is one of the most extraordinary transformations in military history. The Ottomans are immediately struck by the boy. He is physically imposing, tall, broad-shouldered, athletic. He is ferociously intelligent. He takes to military training with an intensity that impresses even the most demanding Ottoman instructors. He learns Turkish. He converts to Islam and receives the name Iskender, Alexander, after Alexander the Great. He earns the honorific Bey, meaning lord or commander, Skanderbeg, Skanderbeg. And then something remarkable happens. The Ottomans use him. They give him commands. He rises through the Ottoman military system with startling speed. By the time he is in his 30s, Skanderbeg is a senior Ottoman commander. He has led cavalry, commanded garrisons, fought in campaigns across the Balkans. He knows the Ottoman military from the inside. He knows how they think, how they plan, how they advance, how they supply, how they communicate. He knows their strengths, and more importantly, he knows their weaknesses. He has spent 2 decades learning everything about the machine he is about to fight. Now, here is where history pivots on an axis. 1443, the Crusade of Varna. A Hungarian-led coalition of Christian forces, Polish, Wallachian, Serbian, Albanian contingents, launches a major offensive against the Ottoman Balkans. For a moment, just a moment, it looks like the tide might turn. The Ottomans are forced to fight on multiple fronts. Their grip on the Balkans loosens slightly. Skanderbeg is serving in the Ottoman army at the time. He is fighting for the empire that took him as a child, trained him, gave him a career, and then he makes a decision that will define the rest of his life. He defects. On November 28th, 1443, with roughly 300 Albanian cavalrymen who follow him into the night, Skanderbeg abandons the Ottoman army during the chaos of the Crusade's initial successes. He rides hard toward Albania, toward home. He arrives at Kruja, the mountain fortress that will become the symbol of Albanian resistance. And he does something audacious. Using a forged letter bearing an Ottoman official seal, because he knows exactly what those letters look like, because he has spent 20 years working within that system. He bluffs his way into the garrison and takes control of the fortress. On November 28, 1443, Skanderbeg reconverts to Christianity, raises the Albanian flag with the black double-headed eagle, the same flag that the modern nation of Albania still flies today, and declares himself the defender of his people. He is 38 years old. He has no army. He has no treasury. He has no major allies. He has a fortress, 300 horsemen, and 20 years of Ottoman military training stored in his mind like a weapon's blueprint. And he begins. Think about that kind of courage for a moment. Not the theatrical courage of a battle charge. The cold, calculating courage of a man who looks at the most powerful empire in the world and says, I know how you work, and I know how to fight you. Now let's talk about exactly what Skanderbeg was fighting. Because if you don't understand the Ottoman military machine of the mid-15th century, you cannot understand why what happens at Albulena is so extraordinary. The Ottoman Empire in 1457 is the most sophisticated military organization on Earth. Full stop. It is not just big. Size alone has never won wars. The Persians were big. The Mongols eventually broke on the walls of castles and the logistics of Europe. Size matters, but organization is what truly terrifies. The Ottomans have organization. At the core of their military are the Janissaries, Yeniçeri in Turkish, meaning new soldiers. These are men recruited as boys, mostly from Christian Balkan families under the devshirme system, the same system that took Skanderbeg. They are raised from childhood to be soldiers. They do not farm. They do not marry. Officially, at least. They do not divide their loyalty between family and sultan. Their entire identity is their unit, their core, their sultan. They are professional soldiers in an age when most armies are composed of feudal levies and seasonal conscripts. They train constantly. They are equipped with the best weapons the Ottoman Empire can produce: crossbows, early firearms, scimitars, and the devastating composite bow that can punch through armor at 100 meters. In 1457, a Janissary regiment is the closest thing the medieval world has to a modern professional infantry division. They are disciplined, experienced, and psychologically conditioned to fight. They do not rout easily. They do not panic at reverses that would scatter lesser troops. They are the iron core of every Ottoman army. Around the Janissaries orbit the Sipahis, the Ottoman cavalry. These are feudal cavalrymen, yes, but organized and trained far beyond the Western European model of the same era. Ottoman Sipahi cavalry fight in coordinated formations. They use combined arms tactics: archery and shock, harassment and pursuit. They have studied the terrain of the Balkans across a century of campaigns. They know how to fight in mountains, in forests, in river valleys. They are not the steppe nomads of a century earlier. These are professional cavalrymen with inherited knowledge of how to break an enemy. Then there is the logistical system. This is what most people miss when they imagine medieval armies. The Ottoman Empire has developed a supply chain that can move 100,000 men across hundreds of miles and keep them fed, armed, and equipped for months of continuous campaigning. They have road networks, supply depots, and administrative systems that allow them to project power in ways that simply aren't possible for smaller states. What all of this means is simple. The Ottoman army doesn't just show up and fight. It arrives. It smothers you. It grinds you down through attrition even when it cannot beat you in open battle. It replaces casualties because there are always more men. It resupplies because the logistics are organized. It keeps coming. And in the years since Skanderbeg defected and raised his flag over Kruja, it has kept coming. 1450, the first major Ottoman siege of Kruja. Murad II himself, the father of Mehmed the Conqueror, brings an army to take the mountain fortress, where Skanderbeg has made his base. He brings siege equipment, tens of thousands of men, the full weight of Ottoman power. And Skanderbeg does something that absolutely nobody expects. He does not hide in his fortress. He leaves a garrison inside the walls, and then he takes his cavalry into the mountains. He raids the Ottoman supply lines. He ambushes foraging parties. He cuts off stragglers. He hits isolated columns and vanishes back into the highlands before anyone can respond. He turns the mountains themselves into a weapon. For 4.5 months, Murad II sits outside Kruja, unable to take it, unable to bring Skanderbeg to a decisive engagement, watching his army erode not from battle, but from raids, disease, supply shortages, and the grinding misery of camping in an Albanian autumn. And then he gives up. The most powerful sultan in the Islamic world packs his siege engines and goes home. Think about what that means for Ottoman prestige. Then 1452, another invasion. then 1455, then 1456. Each time, Skanderbeg defeats or repels Ottoman forces. Each time, the methods are similar. Tactical flexibility, use of terrain, speed of maneuver, refusal to fight the kind of pitched battle the Ottomans are designed to win. He's not fighting the Ottoman Empire's strengths. He's fighting its vulnerabilities. But here's what's important. With each failed invasion, the Ottomans don't become more cautious. They become more determined. And in 1457, they send Ishak Bey with 40,000 men. This is not just an army. This is a statement. This is the Ottoman Empire saying, enough. We will use raw power. We will use numbers so overwhelming that terrain and tactics cannot compensate. We will not be outmaneuvered because there are so many of us that no maneuver can flank all 40,000. We will march through this country, and we will end this. And from Skanderbeg's perspective, standing in his mountain fortress, watching Ottoman scouts fan across the lowlands below, it must seem like he is staring into a tide that cannot be turned. 40,000 against 8,000. He could retreat. He could go further into the mountains, make the Ottomans spend blood-taking fortresses, and hope that eventually they give up again. He has done this before. It works. It's safe. It's survival. But survival is not what he chooses in September of 1457. He chooses to fight. And not just to fight, to destroy. Let's talk about those 8,000 men. Because they are not 8,000 anonymous soldiers. They are the product of years of survival, years of loss, years of watching what happens to the people around them when the Ottomans advance, and no one is there to stop them. They are men whose brothers died in Ottoman raids, men whose villages were burned, men who remember what Albanian life looked like before and understand, completely, viscerally, what is at stake if they fail. Skanderbeg has spent 14 years building this force, and he has built it specifically to fight the Ottomans. This is not a generic medieval army. This is a purpose-engineered fighting machine, designed by a man who spent 20 years inside the system he is now trying to destroy. His cavalry is his greatest weapon. Albanian horsemen, light cavalry, fast, skilled riders, who have grown up on the same mountain terrain where they now fight. They know every valley, every pass, every place where a column must squeeze through a narrow defile, every ridgeline where archers can rain arrows down on troops moving below without any ability to respond. They are not shock cavalry designed to break formations in open fields. They are surgical cavalry. They strike and they vanish. They pursue and they kill. And they can cover distance in these mountains that would leave heavier Ottoman cavalry exhausted and disoriented. Then there is the infantry, Albanian foot soldiers, many of them organized around clan structures, men who fight alongside their cousins, their neighbors, their lords. This is not a weakness. This is strength. When the man next to you is your cousin, and you are standing in the valley your grandfather farmed, you fight differently than a hired mercenary or a conscripted peasant 1,000 miles from home. But what Skanderbeg has given his men above everything else is something the Ottomans cannot manufacture. Experience with this specific terrain, against this specific enemy, using these specific tactics. 14 years of fighting the Ottomans in Albanian mountains has produced the most experienced mountain warfare force in Europe. These men have fought and won and fought again. They have retreated when retreat was right and advanced when advance was possible. They have survived things that should have killed them. They trust Skanderbeg with an intensity that borders on religious devotion, and they have reason to. He has never lost a major engagement. He has beaten superior forces repeatedly. He has made the impossible routine. But there's something deeper here, something psychological that historians sometimes overlook. Skanderbeg's men are not just fighting for victory in this battle, they are fighting for the right to exist. The Ottomans, if they win here, will not merely occupy Albania. The Ottoman system will be applied. The Dev Shurma will collect their children. Their lords will become subjects. Their Christian churches will face increasing pressure. Their identity, the particular, fierce, highland Albanian identity that has persisted through centuries of fragmentation and invasion, will begin the slow process of dissolution. This is not abstract to them. They can see what has happened in Serbia, in Bulgaria, in Macedonia. They know what Ottoman governance looks like from the inside, because many of them have family who've already been absorbed. So when Skanderbeg stands before his commanders in September 1457 and lays out the plan for what he is about to do at Albulena, he is not selling a military strategy. He is offering his men the chance to deliver a blow so decisive that it might finally make the Ottomans reconsider whether Albania is worth the price. The plan is deceptively simple and devastating in its execution. Skanderbeg has chosen the valley of the Shkumbin River near Albulena specifically. He has not chosen it arbitrarily. He has chosen it because he knows Isak Bey's route. He knows the terrain, and he knows that an army of 40,000, moving through a mountain valley with limited lateral space, is not a 40,000-man force anymore. It is a long, strung-out column, moving in a direction it cannot easily change. In the open field, 40,000 is overwhelming. In a mountain valley with steep walls on both sides, 40,000 becomes a crowd, unable to deploy, unable to maneuver, able only to push forward or backward along a narrow axis. Skanderbeg divides his force. Some cavalry will wait on the valley slopes to the north. Some infantry will block the head of the column when the signal comes. Others will seal the rear. And a reserve, fast-moving horsemen, will exploit whatever breaks open in the chaos. The trap has been laid for days. The men have been in position, silent, cold, waiting. The fires they didn't light, the voices they didn't raise, the discipline of men who understand that every sound could cost them everything. And now, on the morning of September 22nd, 1457, the Ottoman column is moving through the valley below. Imagine standing there on that hillside, your breath fogging in the cold air, your sword hand numb from hours of stillness, and below you, the sound of 40,000 men growing closer. The clank of armor, the shuffle of tens of thousands of boots on stony ground, the low rumble of horse hooves and wagon wheels, and somewhere far below, the signal. Now, before we get to the battle itself, we need to talk about what happened in the months and weeks before Albulena. Because battles are not decided on the day they are fought. They are decided in the planning, in the politics, in the psychological state of commanders and troops long before the first blow lands. Skanderbeg, in 1457, is under pressure from multiple directions. The Ottomans are obvious, but there is also the political reality of Albanian internal politics. The Albanian lords, the various clan leaders, and minor princes who form the coalition that Skanderbeg has been trying to hold together since 1443, are not always unified. Some have wavered. Some have made separate accommodations with the Ottomans. Some resent Skanderbeg's dominance. Managing that coalition, keeping men who have their own agendas and their own survival calculations fighting together, is as demanding as any military campaign. There is also the question of European support. Skanderbeg has been the darling of the papacy for years. The Pope has called him champion of Christ. The Italian city-states have sent money, weapons, occasional soldiers. Alfonso V of Naples has been a significant patron. But European support is never reliable. It comes and goes with political winds and competing priorities. In 1457, Skanderbeg cannot count on rescue. He cannot count on reinforcement. He has what he has. What drives him to fight this battle, rather than retreat, rather than defend, rather than sue for negotiated terms, is something that goes beyond military calculation. There is a moment, documented in later accounts, where Skanderbeg addresses his commanders before the battle. The specific words vary by source, but the core message is consistent. He tells them, "The Ottomans have come here expecting that the same people who failed to defend Constantinople, who failed to defend Serbia, who failed to defend Greece, will also fail to defend Albania. They are expecting us to run. They are expecting us to hide. They are not expecting us to choose this valley and close it around them like a fist. Let them not find what they expect. There is something else, something personal." Skanderbeg has spent 14 years fighting the empire that took him as a child, that raised him in their courts and trained him in their military, that expected his loyalty and got his rebellion instead. Every year he fights them is a year he refuses to be what they made him. Every victory is a reclamation of something they tried to take. This battle, for Skanderbeg, is not about tactics. It is about identity. It is about the fundamental human refusal to be told that you cannot exist on your own terms. When that signal comes on the morning of September 22nd, when the moment arrives after days of silence and cold and waiting, every man in those hills knows what it means. Not just militarily, personally, existentially. This is the moment they've been building toward. Let's break down exactly what Skanderbeg does at Albulena,
By the Sultan's decree,
because this is where the military genius becomes visible, and where 14 years of fighting the Ottomans on their own terms crystallizes into a single, perfect operation. The terrain of the Albulena Valley, in the central Albanian highlands, running roughly east-west through a mountain corridor, is Skanderbeg's primary weapon. Think of it this way. Imagine a long hallway, wide enough that an army can march through it comfortably, but with walls on both sides, not walls made of stone and mortar, but walls made of steep, forested mountainsides. If you are in that hallway, you can move forward. You can move backward. Moving sideways means climbing terrain that breaks formations and exhausts men. Now imagine you're an army of 40,000. In open ground, 40,000 soldiers can deploy in formation, perhaps 2 kilometers wide. Organized in depth, cavalry on the flanks, artillery positioned for maximum effect. In that hallway, 40,000 soldiers become something else. The front of the column and the rear of the column might be separated by 10 or 15 kilometers of marching distance. The cavalry can't deploy to the flanks because the flanks are vertical. The commanders in the rear have no idea what's happening in the front. Communication breaks down. The chain of command stretches to its breaking point. This is a modern military concept called channelization. If you force a large force into a narrow channel, you neutralize their numerical advantage. You're not fighting 40,000 anymore. You're fighting whatever portion of that column can respond to contact at any given moment. Maybe 5,000, maybe 8,000. The rest are just spectators being carried along by the men in front of them. Skanderbeg understood this principle 200 years before it was formally articulated in Western military theory. He learned it from experience. He learned it from fighting the Ottomans in these exact mountains for over a decade. His plan at Albulena has several components, each designed to interact with the others. First, concealment. The Albanian forces have been in position for days. In forested highland terrain, 8,000 men can disappear. No fires, no noise. Scouts eliminated or captured before they can report back. The Ottomans advance into the valley without knowing what's waiting in the tree line above them. This is critical. Surprise is not just a tactical advantage here. It is the tactical advantage. An army that knows an ambush is coming prepares. An army that doesn't know, that believes it is marching through hostile but cleared territory toward the Albanian heartland, moves in column, dispersed, with supply wagons mixed in among fighting men, with soldiers eating, adjusting equipment, not holding weapons at the ready. That army is vulnerable in ways it doesn't yet understand. Second, simultaneous action on multiple points. This is the aspect that most separates a great ambush from a mediocre one. A mediocre ambush hits the head of the column, and then you have a battle. A great ambush hits the head and the middle and the rear simultaneously, creating multiple crises that the enemy command structure cannot respond to at once. When the front is under attack, the rear doesn't yet know. When the rear comes under attack, it can't see the front. When the middle is hit, the column folds in on itself, men running forward into men who are running backward, creating exactly the kind of chaos that kills armies faster than any weapon. Third, the exploitation. Skanderbeg keeps a mobile reserve, fast cavalry, not tied to any single ambush point, but ready to pour through whatever gap opens first. When Ottoman formations begin to collapse, when men start running, these riders are there to convert a routing force into a catastrophe. Because a routed army that is pursued properly doesn't stop routing. It runs. And running men don't fight. Running men don't reform. Running men die. The signal comes. The Albanians move. Imagine the world from inside the Ottoman column on the morning of September 22nd, 1457. You are a janissary in the forward elements. Your unit has been marching for days through Albanian mountain country. You are alert. You are always alert. That is what your training does to you. But you are also routine relaxed. You have marched through hostile territory before. You have marched through hostile territory many times. Sometimes there are small Albanian cavalry raids. They are annoying. They are not dangerous to an organized column of your size. You deal with them, and you continue marching. The mountains on both sides are heavily forested. You cannot see far into the trees. This is uncomfortable, but not alarming. Albania is full of mountains and trees. That is what Albania is. You adjust your pack, think about what you will eat when the column halts for midday, and keep marching. Then the arrow storm begins. Not from one direction, from both sides simultaneously. From the forest above you on the left, and the forest above you on the right. The first seconds are confusion. Albanian archers and light infantry positioned on the slopes above the column open fire at almost point-blank range into the massed formation below. Men go down. Men beside them don't know which direction to face, because the threat is coming from both sides at once. And then, the head of the column stops moving. Something has blocked the valley ahead. Albanian infantry crashing down from the slopes to seal the front of the trap. And then the rear. The rear of the column hears something, a rising sound from behind them, the thunder of hooves coming fast. Albanian cavalry, sweeping down from positions above the valley's southern end, driving straight into the back of the column, before it can turn and form a defensive perimeter. 3 attacks, 3 points, happening fast enough that the time between the first contact and the last contact is measured in minutes, not hours. The Ottoman column, which had been 40,000 men marching with purpose toward a military objective, is now 40,000 men packed into a valley with no room to deploy, attacked from above on both sides, blocked at the front and the rear, with no clear command picture of what is happening, with no way to bring cavalry into action, because the terrain doesn't allow it. And here is the psychological key. The Ottomans are professional soldiers. They are not going to break at the first shock of contact. Janissaries don't break easily. They will form into whatever defensive formation the terrain allows. They will fight. Some of them will fight with extraordinary bravery. This is what makes them Janissaries. But they cannot fight what they cannot see. They cannot respond to command and control that is broken down under the complexity of multiple simultaneous attacks. They cannot use their numbers in a space that has negated those numbers. And they cannot run. Because running means either into the men in front of you who are already dying, or into the men in the rear who are being hit by cavalry. The greatest weapon the Ottomans have brought to this valley is their numbers. And Skanderbeg has turned that greatest weapon into a liability. Too many men in too small a space. The column cannot expand laterally. It cannot form a battle line. It simply absorbs casualties, contracts, tries to defend in every direction at once, and begins to disintegrate. And Skanderbeg, watching from a position above the valley where he can see the shape of what's happening, because he has planned this and he knows what to look for, chooses his moment to commit the reserve. The Albanian cavalry reserve hits the Ottoman column at its breaking point. Think about the sound, the noise of 40,000 men in a mountain valley, screaming, shouting commands, weapons clashing, the high shriek of wounded horses, the thundering hooves of cavalry drives, is something that has no modern equivalent. It is not just loud, it is overwhelming to the senses. Soldiers in the Ottoman column can barely hear orders from 10 feet away. Officers shout until their voices break, and still no one hears. The chain of command, that essential mechanism that lets a large army function as a single organism, is severed. What remains is individual combat. Man against man. In individual combat in a forest-flanked mountain valley, against an enemy who knows every rock and root and sight line. The Albanians have every advantage. They're fighting in their homeland. They know where to put their feet. They know which direction the ground drops. They know the shortcuts. Ottoman soldiers, far from their bases, fighting in unfamiliar terrain, surrounded by noise and chaos and dying comrades, are disoriented in a way that no amount of training completely solves. The Albanian cavalry drives through the Ottoman formation like a wedge, not stopping, not engaging in prolonged individual combat, but driving, pushing, opening gaps that infantry pour through behind them. A gap in a defensive formation is not just a tactical problem, it is a psychological catastrophe. When the man next to you suddenly doesn't exist anymore, when there's open space where there should be a shield, something happens to soldiers that training only partially mitigates. They start thinking about living. Not all of them. Not even most of them at first. But the ones who start running create a cascade. Because when a man to your right runs, the man to your right's position is now open. The man to your left sees the gap, sees the man running, and begins to calculate whether the defensive position still makes sense. This is how armies die. Not all at once, but in cascading failures of individual nerve, spreading through a formation like water through cracked stone. The Ottoman forward elements, those closest to the blocking force at the valley head, fight with the particular savagery of men who have nowhere to retreat. They are pushed from behind by the crowd of their own soldiers, and they cannot go back. They fight until they die, or until the formation around them simply ceases to function. The rearward elements, those hit by the Albanian cavalry from behind, don't even have that option. The cavalry doesn't let them form a line. It keeps moving, keeps hitting, keeps driving the rear of the column forward into the middle, compressing the mass of men further, making the chaos worse. In the middle, the worst place to be, Ottoman soldiers are being pushed from two directions simultaneously, by their own comrades, shot at from above, and beginning to realize that the chain of command that normally tells them what to do simply isn't functioning anymore. There are no clear orders. There are no clear targets. There is only the terrible geometry of men in a space too small for them, dying faster than they can be replaced. Ishak Bey, the Ottoman commander, is somewhere in this chaos. Later accounts are unclear about exactly where he was during the battle. What is clear is that he was unable to exercise command effectively. The battle happened too fast, too comprehensively. By the time the scale of the disaster became clear to the Ottoman High Command, the opportunity to organize a coherent response had already passed. The rout begins, not everywhere at once, but it begins. And when it begins, when Ottoman soldiers start breaking and running from the valley in whatever direction offers the most open ground, Skanderbeg's cavalry is there. This is the pursuit phase. This is where a victory becomes a destruction. Defeated soldiers who are allowed to walk away can regroup. They can be reorganized. They can fight again next week. Defeated soldiers who are run down and killed by cavalry while fleeing cannot do any of these things. The pursuit phase of a battle often produces more casualties than the battle itself. It is brutal, exhausting, and it is conducted by men who are themselves tired, themselves bloodied, but who understand that if they stop now, everything they've done might only half work. The Albanian cavalry pursues, relentlessly. The Ottoman force that entered the valley of Albulena at 40,000 men does not leave at 40,000 men. Contemporary accounts put Ottoman losses at somewhere between 22 and 24,000 dead. That is more than half the army. Killed in the valley, killed in the pursuit, drowned in the Shkumbin River trying to cross, captured and executed in the days following the battle. The exact figures are disputed, as they always are with medieval battles. But the scale of the disaster is not disputed. Ishak Bey escapes. He gets out with a portion of his force, perhaps 15,000 men, perhaps fewer, and retreats back toward Ottoman territory. He has lost more than half his army. He has lost enormous quantities of equipment, horses, supplies, and weapons that the Albanians will collect from the valley floor for days afterward. More importantly, he has lost something that cannot be counted in bodies or equipment. He has lost the aura of Ottoman invincibility. Now step back with me. The battle lasts a few hours. The cleanup, the pursuit, the capture, the collection of weapons and equipment takes days. But the consequences take years to fully unfold. The immediate aftermath is shock. Genuine, widespread, European-spanning shock. News of Albulena spreads across the continent within weeks. In Rome, Pope Calixtus III, who has been desperately trying to organize a crusade against the Ottomans in the years following the fall of Constantinople, receives the reports with something close to disbelief. 8,000 men, 40,000 Ottoman soldiers, 22,000 dead. This is not a raid. This is not a defensive holding action. This is an annihilation. The Pope elevates Skanderbeg in his official correspondence. Letters and commemorations pour out of the papal court, calling him defender of the faith, athlete of Christ, champion of Christendom. These are not empty honorifics. They are political statements. The papacy is telling the Christian world, this man is what resistance looks like. This man is what is possible. In Constantinople, Sultan Mehmed II, who is in the middle of his extraordinary project of building Istanbul into the capital of a world empire, receives the reports about Albulena with controlled fury. He is a man of formidable intelligence and iron self-control, and he understands what this defeat means politically. Every Christian principality still holding out, every wavering Albanian lord who was considering whether to submit or resist. Every Hungarian border lord, every Venetian administrator on the Adriatic coast, all of them look at Albulena and recalculate. If Skanderbeg can do this, what else is possible? Mehmed does not abandon his Albanian policy after Albulena. He's not the kind of man who gives up. But the defeat forces a recalibration. There are no major Ottoman offensives into Albania in the immediate years following 1457. The empire turns its attention to other projects: the coast of Italy, the Aegean Islands, the Serbian remnants. Albania is temporarily, if not permanently, placed in a different risk category. This matters more than it might seem, because the period of relative quiet following Albulena gives the Albanian principalities time. Time to repair damage, time to rebuild, time to strengthen alliances with Venice and Naples, time for Skanderbeg to continue building the coalition that has always been his most fragile asset. And time, in the 15th century Balkans, is measured in years of survival against an empire that has never failed, over the very long term, to get what it wants. Skanderbeg will fight the Ottomans for the rest of his life. He dies in 1468, 11 years after Albulena, still fighting. He dies of malaria in Leja, the Albanian port city, while negotiating with Venice for more support against a new Ottoman offensive. He is 62 or 63 years old. He has spent 25 years of his life in almost continuous warfare against the Ottoman Empire, and never, in a major engagement, been definitively defeated. After his death, the coalition he built falls apart. The internal divisions he spent decades suppressing resurface. The Albanian lords cannot hold together without the one man who could make them cohere. By 1478, Kruja, the mountain fortress that had twice repelled Ottoman sieges, finally falls. By 1479, most of Albania is under Ottoman control. You might ask, so what did it matter? He fought all his life, and after he died, they took the country anyway. What was the point? This is the wrong question. Think about what the 25 years of Albanian resistance actually accomplished. Think about the time. Every year the Ottomans spent fighting Skanderbeg in Albanian mountains was a year they were not driving deeper into Italy. Every expedition that ended in defeat or costly stalemate drained resources that could not be used elsewhere. The Ottoman advance into the Italian peninsula, which genuinely terrified Rome, which briefly succeeded at Otranto in 1480, was delayed, complicated, made more difficult. But beyond the strategic calculation, think about what Skanderbeg meant as a symbol. In an era when the Ottoman advance seemed unstoppable, when Constantinople had fallen, when Serbia was gone, when one Christian power after another had submitted or collapsed, one man held on. One force in one small, poor, mountainous principality kept fighting and kept winning. Albulena was not just a military victory, it was proof that the Ottoman military was not invincible. Proof that with the right terrain, the right tactics, the right leadership, and the right will, a smaller force could shatter a larger one. That proof mattered. It mattered to the men who fought at Lepanto in 1571, who held Malta in 1565, who charged down Kahlenberg Mountain at Vienna in 1683. Somewhere in the deep historical memory of European resistance to Ottoman expansion, the name Skanderbeg stands at the beginning. The man who first showed that it could be done. And then there is the Albanian identity, the national memory. Even after the Ottoman conquest, Albanian clan culture and language and identity persisted in ways that confounded the empire's usual absorptive patterns. The Albanian highlanders, the mountain clans of the north especially, maintained a fierce, continuous, and distinctly Albanian way of life through centuries of Ottoman rule. They preserved the memory of Skanderbeg not as a defeated figure, but as a hero, as a proof of what they were capable of. When Albanian national identity re-emerged in the 19th century as part of the broader Balkan nationalist awakening, when Albanians began to demand recognition as a distinct people with a distinct history, they reached back to the 15th century and found Skanderbeg waiting for them. The black double-headed eagle he raised over Kruzia in 1443 became the Albanian flag. His image appears on Albanian currency. His statue stands in the central square of Tirana, the modern capital. Every Albanian child learns his name. He is, in a very real sense, the father of Albanian national identity. Not because he won in the end, but because he showed his people who they were. So let me ask you something. What do we actually learn from the Battle of Albulena? Not the specific tactics, not the particular geography of a 15th century Albanian valley. Those details are fascinating, but they're not the lesson. The lesson is about what happens when a man refuses to accept the calculus of the powerful. The powerful, the Ottoman Empire in 1457. Look at the numbers and see certainty. 40,000 against 8,000. The math is obvious. The outcome is predetermined. Send the army, crush the resistance, absorb the territory, move on. This is the way empires work. They apply overwhelming force, and they wait for the inevitable. And what Skanderbeg says, what he says not in words, but in every action of his military life, is that overwhelming force is only overwhelming when you fight it on its own terms, when you let it choose the ground, the formation, the timing, when you let the powerful write the rules of the engagement, change the rules, and the math changes with them. This is why the Valley of Albulena matters. Not because 8,000 is a magic number, not because Albanian soldiers are somehow superhuman, but because one man, one extraordinarily capable, extraordinarily experienced, extraordinarily determined man, designed a situation where 40,000 became irrelevant, where the terrain neutralized the numbers, where surprise neutralized the organization, where the intimate knowledge of place and enemy destroyed the advantage of size. And this is not unique to the 15th century. This is a recurring pattern in human history. The underdog who beats the favorite almost never does it by trying to outmuscle the favorite. They do it by changing what the contest is, by redefining the battlefield, literally or metaphorically, until the thing the opponent is best at becomes the thing that doesn't matter. Think about that in your own life for a moment. Think about the times when the person, or the institution, or the situation you were facing seemed overwhelming, not because you were bad at what you do, but because the rules were set up to favor them. The lesson of Albulena is not that the smaller force always wins. It doesn't. Skanderbeg himself would tell you that, because his people eventually lost to the empire he spent his life fighting. The lesson is that you choose your ground, you choose your moment. You design the engagement around your strengths and their weaknesses rather than playing their game. You refuse to accept that the numbers on paper determine the outcome on the ground. Skanderbeg spent 25 years embodying that refusal. And even though the empire eventually took Albania after his death, even though the historical forces he held at bay for so long ultimately prevailed, he extracted something from that struggle that no army could take away. He gave his people a story, a memory, a proof of what they were. And 600 years later, we're here, talking about him, thinking about him, learning something from him. That's not nothing. That might actually be everything. I want to know what you think. Was Skanderbeg the greatest guerrilla commander in history? Is the Battle of Albulena the most underrated military victory of the medieval world? Or is there another battle, another commander, another moment in history where a small force changed everything? And you think I should cover it next? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you made it this far, if you spent this time in an Albanian mountain valley in 1457 with 8,000 men who refused to be erased, thank you. Genuinely. The fact that you're here, that stories like this still matter to people, is what makes this worth doing. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the moment, because there are 100 more stories like this one waiting. Battles nobody teaches you in school. Commanders who changed history from positions of impossible disadvantage. Moments where the world was balanced on a knife edge, and one decision sent it spinning in a direction nobody expected. Hit that button. The next story is already being built. And remember this, the valley doesn't care about the numbers. Only the man who chooses the valley does.